Well, folks, this morning is going to be an absolutely fantastic podcast because I'm doing a Leading Your Best Life, but I'm talking to an absolute legend in Australian water polo, the great Tom Hoad. And I'm going to save Tom some time because even though I know, can talk about himself, and we're going to really delve down into the Kaizen mindset and what it takes to be a champion in water polo. Just so you know who we're talking to here, folks, I'm going to go straight to the Sporting Hall of Fame to talk about this guy, Tom Hoad, who I'm about to introduce you to, Order of Australia. Besides that, as it says, Tom's contribution to water polo is deeply ingrained he's fittingly called Mr Water Polo. I know he's embarrassed and humble about that. As a player and coach, he represented Australia at 8 Olympic Games, selected for 4 Olympics: Rome 1960, Tokyo 64, Mexico 68, Munich 72, including 3 as captain, while he was coach of the Australian Olympics team at 4 games: Montreal, Moscow, Los Angeles and Seoul. And it goes on and on and on, including all the great work he did in terms of helping win the World Championships to Perth in the 90s, and I worked with him on that as well. But Tom, welcome to this podcast.
Thanks, Leigh.
Mate, I really I'm so honoured and thankful for you doing this. Mate,
as I haven't mentioned in my CV, my complete incompetence at technical in Zoom meetings. It's taken us a half an hour to get this up.
Well, you can't be a genius at everything, mate. You can't be a genius at everything.
Genius at nothing's closer to the truth.
Yeah, mate. See, look at that humility, folks. Humility. I love that. Tom, well, let me say where this has come from is, as I said, with our juniors, we put together a program we call Kaizen Mindset, helping the juniors with a whole range of things, and they're not only juniors but actually our National League players as well. And I know some Melville guys came to the first one I ran last year. We started talking about things like your mind is the greatest weapon, pre-game preparation, during the game, post-game, getting the most out of yourself and your teammates, handling losses and setbacks in your career and season, lessons from the club and the world's bests. And this is one of the reasons you're here. We want to tap in on your strategies, mental and physical. But look, thank you again. Tell us a bit about your water polo journey, just in a nutshell. Where did you? How old were you when you started? How did you get into it? And tell us a bit about that journey.
Well, I was a swimmer, swimming in state butterfly titles, which I won under 14, under 16 and open, 200 metres. But I was in the Melville Swimming Club, which also had water polo in the river, which is still all the history is still there. They were combined. And then the swimming club separated and we decided to build a pool down here. But we brought over in 1959 Anton Bolvari, who remained after the revolution in the Russian invasion of Budapest and the Olympic Games and the blood in the water game, remained in Australia with his wife and played in Victoria for 2 seasons. And I don't know whether you were aware, but at that time, the competition in Victoria between the expatriate Hungarians who had escaped after the revolution and the international players who were playing for Richmond, all Hungarians. And in Melbourne's side were 2 Olympians from Yugoslavia, the Stakula brothers, Marsha and Jaegers, and the competition was as good as anything in the world. Wow. And they were getting 3,000 people. And I was only a young guy, and we had a coach, Jeff Campbell, and I must have been 18 at the time, and we said, we're so far behind Victoria. I think we were beaten 13-5 or 13-2 the last time we ever played them, and we were a light year behind them. And we said, we don't know anything about it, and this guy is a dual gold medalist, won a gold medal in 52 and 56, and we'll get him over here to be our coach. So I put in £50, my savings. Now, where I got the £50 from is a moot point. I have no remembrance of ever earning £50, but it's a considerable sum by today's standards.
Yeah.
We brought him over and we won, and he came with him another good Hungarian player, junior international, Imre Tokic, who played for Fremantle. We didn't all put them into one team. We spread them out so that the competition in Western Australia then took on a new face. It became much better. And he coached really. His English wasn't so good, and he coached really by example because he was a playing coach. And we learned so much from him, still not enough, but we learned, and he could shoot so much better than any of our players. And that's still the case today, unfortunately, because they did so much as kids. And even in 1964, when our coach was another Hungarian, Alex Gerzi, who had come to Australia much earlier, he was 44, and at 44 years of age, he was a better shooter than anyone in our team. And so at least in Bigton, but only for 6 months of the year, we could train properly. We could shoot and we could put the goals in any time. The water was cold for the first couple of months in October, November, and then we played through till about April. But we didn't have an Olympic pool in Western Australia until Beatty Park was built for the Commonwealth Games in 1962. And so that was, I had been to Hungary. Australian water polo was then under the aegis of Australian swimming. And we didn't separate till much, much later. And Bill Burge Phillips, who was the executive director of Australian swimming and the incumbent FINA president, sent me to Hungary, or I paid to go, but he arranged it all. And Bolvari had in the interim gone back to Hungary because he couldn't earn money from being a water polo player in Australia. And I had 3 months in Hungary as a guest of the Hungarian Federation. I stayed with Kalman Markovic, the captain of the team, who was a count and had a big villa because Bolvari only had a little one-bedroom flat. And so I had 3 months there and learned so much, went with a team called Spartacus, and then I returned to Australia and took up coaching Western Australia. And we then won in 1964 the national titles and 5 of our players got into the national team, which was then selected by the Australian swimming selectors. So that's just a brief history and background. That's where it was. But I can assure you that as a state coach, even though we won that year and continued to win the occasional, Victoria and New South Wales were still strong, and it was always a 3-way competition. And sometimes, because of the costs involved, some of our players weren't available. Les Nunn was without question the best player in Australia, in my opinion, at that time, from Western Australia. But he wasn't always available to come over to the national titles.
So just on that, let's just delve into this, Tom. Clearly, one of the principles we talk about from neuro-linguistic programming is use the right strategy, get the right result, both the mental strategy and the physical strategy. Now, you've always told me, I think it was it Alex Gerzi, he was the best shot by far when he came over. Just tell me again his height how old he was at the time.
He was 5'4", so diminutive, also by our standards. None of us were that small, but he had fantastic legs, rose out of the water to his bathers, and shot the ball twice as hard as any of the national team.
Incredible.
44 and never played for Hungary. He was a club player.
So it wasn't even good enough to play for Hungary, but could still be, as you say, one of the...
But still at 44 was a better shooter than us. His techniques were better. And why? Because he began... When you became a water polo player in Hungary, they had heated pools all the year round. They had their first heated pool in the Chozos bars, the Caesar bars it's called, in Budapest in 1927. Yeah. And then they had the indoor pool on Margaret Island, which is still there, in 1930. So they were so far ahead of us, and all these kids were training. They stopped school at 2:30, went down to the Chozos bars, and they had 10 goals around the side of the pool where they shot for hours every day. And
Wow.
we couldn't do that. Firstly, we didn't have the heated pools. But even if today, none of our young players would shoot as much as I did when I was 18, which was every day, and
Well,
20 later on. But the key factor in it all, because it is allied to the central nervous system, to the mental application,
yes.
to any skill is best acquired pre-puberty. We do
Mm.
it in our sports, crickets, football. They do it in other sports throughout soccer, throughout the world. Maradona began at 6 in the streets of Buenos Aires. You don't have good skills unless you begin pre-puberty, which hardly anybody in Australia does. We have a little bit of under 12s. I know at UWA and at Melville we have under 12s, but in the winter they go and play footy and other sports. They do not train 12 months of the year. And so
Mate, that's a fantastic insight right there in terms of, as you say, the pre-puberty principle. Because I literally just did a podcast yesterday with Garrett Zahn and Hannes Dorbe yesterday, and both of them started at around 8, which was your point yesterday.
yeah,
And
exactly.
Garrett
And
said to me that he would every day do an hour of centre forward drills, which is exactly your point around the 10
exactly.
goals and 2:30 in the
It's a
afternoon.
repetition of skill. Firstly, you have to have a good coach, but then you have to do the repetition and develop that. No one in Australia, let me give you this example. Gergely Kish, a triple gold medalist who runs a junior program in a new swimming pool about 30 k's out of Budapest, indoor pool. He says to his 8 to 10-year-olds, you must have 150 shots a week. Nobody in this country, firstly, we don't have anyone between 8 and 10 playing that is regularly training at that extent, to that extent. So
Mm-hmm.
what it means is skill acquisition belongs into the mental central nervous system. It goes into there and you improve and acquire and strengthen it.
Absolutely.
And if you don't do it, if you do it post puberty, it's too late. The graph showing improvement in technical skills is not vertical, but about 45 degrees pre puberty, and then it flattens out and goes up at about 10%. So that is the biggest thing. And if you've got the players who have the ability to do it, they can then bring it on at any time. Obviously, in the Serbian, Hungarian, Spanish, in the top European countries, and now in Greece, they are doing it with 8-year-olds in the clubs all along the Piraeus, Athens Riviera. There are about 10 good clubs, and they are doing it seriously with the juniors. And
Beautiful.
it's no coincidence that the highest goal scorer in the women's team at the moment on the Australian National League is one of the Harablides twins, and a sister is not far behind. And the other one playing for Sydney Uni is Annie Espar. She's up there too. And in the men's, every single one of the top scorers, there are no Australians amongst them. They are all imported. In the case of, we have in your club alone, there are 2 Americans and 1 Brazilian. They are the 3 top scorers. And then comes, I think, Andy Ford
Forward.
and Joan, no, not Jones, his son, Nick
Hughes.
Nick Hughes,
Yep.
who's never been a national player but has been an excellent club player. It's the same. There's a Hungarian import in the Hurricanes, one of the bottom teams. He's their top scorer. The same with the team that was over here, Balmain, that beat you people surprisingly in one game. That American player, who's not a national player, played scored 8 goals. Garrett, I think his first name is. Excellent player. No, the I don't know what the name of the Balmain player was.
Yes, S-Far or something like that, because I was
He
commentating.
scored 8 goals.
Yes,
He's not a national player. So even in America, in the schools and that, they are training 4 hours a day and specialising in water polo.
Yep.
And so when you talk about having the mental skills to be able to concentrate, it is important. All this visualization before the game of what's going to happen is good. But when you're competing against players who are far more competent in particularly in the ball handling skills, we are starting behind the 8 ball. And I came back from Hungary in 1962 and wrote a report for Bill Burge Phillips in Australian Swimming. And he said, we are the best swimming nation on earth, which we were then, after 56, where we got 1, 2, and 3 in men and women's 100 metres, and also in Rome and in Tokyo with Conrads and Henricks and Dawn Fraser, a 3rd gold medal. We were the top, Kevin Barry and butterfly. We were the top swimming nation on earth, and we were way down the list. And he wanted to know why there was no more correlation between swimming ability and water polo success. And we were quite a strong swimming team relative to the Europeans, but where we fell down were in the ball skills. And that is still the case today. And I'm patron of Australian Water Polo, and I spoke to the executive of Australian Water Polo, the board, 1.5 years ago, and said, unless we begin with the 10-year-olds, training them regularly, we will never bridge that gap. And we still haven't. Greece, for example, in all my time as coach, Greece never beat us in the Olympic Games, nor did Canada. And you saw that Nicholas, the Canadian player playing for Wes, he is the highest scorer for Wes, and he shoots better than any Australian, a Canadian, and we have never been beaten by Canada. The second highest scorer at our club is an Iranian, and he told me he started when he was 6. We have a Canadian also here, Rue, who started when he was 6. So, I feel as though I'm repeating myself ad nauseum, and the people don't understand what the difference is. And until we do that, we will never succeed, despite our swimming skills. And Australia is a great sporting nation. And, at my club where I am now, I get off the bus and there is an oval where you can go and kick a footy any day of the week. And every day of the summer when I got off the bus, in most cases, most days, because it was the school holidays, there was a father there at the nets, which are free of charge on the oval, 2 cricket nets, where he was bowling a ball to his son, teaching him the fundamentals and the rudiment skills of cricket. So we do it in our other sports, but we have resisted. And I blame the executive of Australian Water Polo for not understanding the point and realising. And it's the same in the women's. The best, if you go through the women's results so far in our national league, all the highest scorers are from overseas, including from Cronulla, the girl who played for Australia, but she wasn't in the USA national team, Djakovic or something similar. So, and even Bronwyn Knox is still the highest goal scorer for the team that came over here, and Kitty Hearn, who came over last week. And the old players are still good. And this is because they've done it. It's repetitious, and they've got the experience and the mental strength to
Well, we're talking high level right now in terms of, as you say, there's a great principle we say is the ecosystem. The forest shapes the tree. That the ecosystem you grow up in makes all the difference. And if you take, let's just take Maggie Steffens alone, her father playing international water polo. The same with Hannes, his eldest sister played water polo and swam, so she was a role model. So the Ford family, you take George and Andrew Ford, the ecosystem, and I suppose particularly down at Melville, you've got the Neesham ecosystem. So if you once you go ecosystem, and again we've talked about this, Croatia, I think you said there's how many goals, because everywhere you go around those
100 goals donated by the federal government to the Water Polo Federation of Croatia along all the Croatian coastline. So even the kids, for example, there is every year Fatovic has a Cap 7 foreign coaching course at a little place called Savtat, which is a beautiful little village just south of 20 k's out of Dubrovnik, right near the Dubrovnik airport.
Is that your phone? Is that your phone?
Yeah, it's my.
I'm going to just mute it. Put it. Yep.
Yeah, and so those kids were in the water. Firstly, they have much longer school holidays than we do. They go from memory in Croatia. They begin in June 6th or 10th or something like that.
Tommy, can you mute that? Is that possible? Mute that phone?
Yes, about June 10 and go back in September 16, quasi 3 months.
Yep.
And they are there all day, and whilst people swim in the sea, it's loaded with tourists, but they just want to swim in the sea, and the pool is in the sea, and the water was beautiful and warm. These kids were training and messing around in front of goals. The goals are permanently there, shooting 6 hours a day. We can't compete with that.
No.
The bulk of the pools, there are school pools now, but the bulk of the pools are controlled by the councils in Australia, and the kids cannot get access to them. And access comes at 7 o'clock at night, and you can't do 3 hours, 10 o'clock at night if you can keep the pool open to that time.
Yep. Listen, Tommy, we're talking high level. I want to now talk to help our juniors, the kids that are actually playing from, say, age 8, 10, 11 and 12, to give them some ideas to help in terms of strategy, both mental and physical, to get better results out of themselves. Now, I'm going to go through a number of principles. These are things that we teach and in no particular order. Let's just start with the principle here that I talk about Ronaldo, and you've already talked about Messi and others. If you want to be extraordinary, you have to do the extra. So in your experience of players who really got the most out of their potential, think of some people you know who did the extra training, not just the team training, because even when they're at training, I'm saying to kids, I want you to do deliberate practice. Just don't go and shoot. Don't just go and be actually specific about what you're trying to do with the shot or with the pass. So if we come to this principle of you want to be extraordinary, do the extra. Give me some examples of people you've known who've done the extra to get the best out of their potential, and what is it that they did, including yourself?
One, I was by international standards. I think I've told you, and I'll just briefly repeat it, that when I was in Hungary, they only played 11 players in those days. There was one player, Garbi, who became a referee, whom I would have said I was a better shooter than he was. They were the bottom of the ladder in Hungarian water polo, and I was equivalent to their 10th best player as a shooter. My skills, in comparison with the best skills in the world, which were then the Hungarians, was appalling. Now, in my time as coach, Charlie Turner and Chris Wybrow, and maybe even others, Andrew Kerr, not to the extent, they began early, and Charlie Turner and Chris Wybrow, together with Charlie's brother Michael, who was a goalkeeper, shot every day in Adelaide in cold water pools and put the extra time in at 10 years of age. And they were Charles was in his day, and Chris Wybrow were equivalent to any of the good international shooters.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I remember Charlie in the 70s or the 80s or thereabouts. I did an interview with Charles, and two things he told me was one, he would kick with both legs in his shot, from what I recall. Do you recall anything about that?
yes, he had a sort of a frog kick that rose from the water, and a lot of the Europeans use that. They do instead of a scissor kick, they do a frog kick and come up and kick on the way down singly. So that's a technique that at one stage the Serbians were teaching. They're not doing it anymore. They're letting the players develop their own technique. And I mean, a player like Jaksic and Mandic, they've got their own techniques, but they're both phenomenal shooters. They're both Serbian.
Yep.
And these individual skills they've developed doing extra work in the pool. There's no
Yep.
question about that.
And let's
So
just
I
talk.
had to. Now, in our day, and I didn't coach him, but he's one of the best players in the world, and the best Australian player has come from our club, Aaron Younger, who's still playing in Reco. And
Yep.
it is a great pity that we haven't been able to convince him to come and play for Australia in the last two Olympics. And the next player who I did have a lot of influence on, because I coached him in under 14s, under 16s, under 18s, when we won, then our club won the national titles in those age groups. And Pavlard was a result of that. And he didn't begin as early as Charlie at 10, but he had a very long limbs and good potential from day one. And he's the best player in our club and is going back for a professional career next year in Pro Reco, and he'd been playing in Barceloneta with Elvis Fatovic for the past couple of years.
Yep.
He's a great Australian player.
Yep, we hit both of them. So let's delve down. Charlie Turner. Let's just take Charlie Turner, Aaron Younger, and Pavlard. Let's talk about them for a moment. Not only you've talked about the extra that they've done. Let's just talk about this next one, mind control. Because when I spoke to Charlie way back then, I talked to him about his mental approach to the game. He said, "Leigh, let me tell you, I see the game as a blank canvas, and I have the paintbrush." And I've gone, wow, what a paradigm. In terms of what does that say versus I'm in the game, I hope I play well. That's a completely different mindset. So let's just go through things you've noticed or heard players say, or even yourself, in terms of mind control and approach to the game, whether it be Charlie Turner, Aaron Younger, Luke Pavlard.
Yes, that has to be some sort of symbiosis between the coach and the player to get them in the right frame of mind. I was criticised, let me tell you, with some justification as a coach that my pre-game talks were too long and too technical.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time, because it is an important aspect of the game, on extra man attack and defence. And I think with the great wisdom of hindsight, the boys might have shut off a little bit because they knew it. They reckon they knew it off by heart, but I'm not sure that they did. And so that could have easily been my fault. But nevertheless, we did have good extra man attack and defence moves, I think, in the period that we were playing. Now, Charlie concentrated that. He was great on the he knew we had moves where Peter Montgomery, who was an excellent passer of the ball, he used to slide in. They'd do a screen on the outside and then slide across the front. He concentrated on that like glue. He had that. He knew it because he could score a goal. And so that was in the defensive aspect of the game. He wasn't as conscientious as he perhaps could have been, but he was a great attacker. So he concentrated on that. But I think now, and as you leave, I wasn't a great defender either, if I may say so. And that's not being in any way modest. I wasn't a great attacker by international standards. But what I did, I have understood very much when I became a coach, that defence is as important, if not more important, than attack. And I think all the great coaches, Stamanic and that, were very, very good defensive coaches. And so I think that's a little bit, and I've been quite impressed with Tim Hamill. One thing he did do excellently with the national side was improve their blocking, and with their goalkeeper, who did play excellently, Porto, who's playing in Barceloneta, they achieved good results.
Well, let's just delve down on some of those things, Tom, because we say deliberate practice rather than just practice. So if we're going to talk defence for a second, when you're coaching or you're talking to a junior, what are some of the things you want them deliberately practicing in defence? And straight away you've talked about Tim Hamill clearly got the players to deliberately practice blocking. So what would be 2 or 3 tips you'd give them in regard to deliberate practice in defence?
Okay, well, I've got perhaps a slightly different point of view than most people in Australia. I believe with the shortening of the pool and the reduction of the attack time, but down from 30 to 25 seconds, and the extra man down to 15, you haven't time for long passes and great schematics in extra man attack and defence, and you should be playing press, because the number of turnovers has increased roughly about between 20 and 30%, depending upon the games, for both teams, and both teams have more opportunity to score a goal than ever before. So shooting now becomes not far more important skill than ever before. And as I have said on many occasions, shooting is the weakness of Australian water polo. And the evidence for that I've already elucidated. So I think that you have to teach these young kids to learn how to play press without fouling, and to play in the passing lane like the Japanese. They are the best examples playing today, and they've developed from very small players a very unique style of playing this press, not fouling, and playing in the lane. And I mean, even in the recent World Cup against Serbia, one of the top nations on earth, the Japanese scored 15 goals to 16. They lost by a goal. They still could score 15 goals against Serbia. When we beat Serbia in Paris, which was a big feather in our cap, they played particularly badly, and we beat them 8-3. But the Japanese scored double figures in each case. So I think the modern rules give much more benefit to counterattack and even more to shooting. And they are 2 things that I would like to see Australian water polo concentrating on more than what we do, than zone defence, because zone defence opens up the attack, the opposition to do what they want, and they're better shooters than us. So that if we play 10 attacks in zone, against a zone, and 10 defences against a zone, we will come off second best every day of the week. And I've tried to explain that to the people who will listen, and I don't know whether they take me seriously or not, or say, this guy's as old as Methuselah, he's past it, he's lost the plot. And I'm inclined to think that's the example. I believe I'm right, but I think the message is falling on dead ears.
Okay, let's just go back then. Let's talk about specific shooting. Let's talk about strategies around shooting. Now, in one of my podcasts, I asked Cover, and I said, once I literally said, what do you look for when you're shooting? He said, I look for the hole. I want to punish. He says, I want to punish the goalkeeper. So I said, because I wanted to go, what's his mental strategy? Because literally, as you know, I've played for a long time. I didn't start till I was 17 or 18, so I was way too late. But I'd just be saying, I think there's a shot on, I took it, versus where's the hole, or even create the hole. So clearly you, with 8 Olympics and all the coaching you've done and your own gameplay, what do you teach the kids to look for and think about and do when it comes to shooting, and what I would call specific shooting, to improve their shooting?
Firstly, the first prerequisite is to look at the goals.
Yes.
And assess and time it. The Iranian shooter that we've got here is a very big guy, but he holds the ball absolutely still, doesn't give a balk. Whereas Cover, and I'm sure you're aware that I went to Spain and brought Cover to our club in Melville.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that.
Yes,
It made a massive difference to Australian water polo.
His father taught, according to Cover, his father taught him to shoot when he was in East Germany. He was with the Russian army in East Germany, and he taught him every day in one of the East German clubs how to shoot. And Cover,
well, his father was a legend, by the way, because I went to his father's funeral. His father was a legend in European water polo, wasn't it? Or Ukrainian water polo. So Cover's come from an ecosystem of in depth
in those
as well.
days, Barkalov was one of the greatest Russian players of all time. Now, of course, because of the war, they've hardly been able to participate. And Russian water polo, because they've not been allowed to participate internationally, has fallen well below what they were. But Kharkov, who's playing for Croatia, is the best Russian player in the world today. And he's a good player by international standards, not the best player in the world, however.
Okay, so coming back to specific shooting.
Coming back to Cover it was just repetitious shooting against a good goalie. And he just did it time and time again with a passer passing to him. Sometimes it would be straight off the hand. Sometimes it was with a balk. He had a phenomenal balk, a very, very unique style Cover, which went around, and he could let the ball go at any time in the face on when he was balking. And that's also a characteristic of Jaksic, the Serbian player today, who's captain of Serbia. He has this phenomenal ball where the goalie doesn't know when he's going to let the ball go. They're peculiar skills that it's not easy to develop. There was a Serbian player, a Montenegrin player by the name of, I've just forgotten his name, Slavko, but he had a phenomenal slow stop-start. And so there are different techniques. And I don't believe in just saying this is the only way you can throw a ball. A great player in the 60s, Ivo Sipsi from Split, was 6'7", and used to throw it like a rock around, not over the head, but round on the side. So there have been many unique styles in throwing, and it's not one size fits all. So the important aspect is that they go and regularly get good shooting with just one or two players against a good goalkeeper. And Charlie Turner did that, and they've all done that. And we, with our training systems in Australia, where we get a pool and we have to have 14 people because we've got to pay for the hire of the pool in our club, we have to play if you haven't got 14 players. So we don't do any of that individual shooting. And therefore find the time. And I'm agitating in our club that they open the pool to the kids in the afternoon, particularly in the school holidays, where they can come down and throw at will. And I don't know whether you know, we've been given a grant by the Labor government, if they retain power, that we will put another pool above our club rooms down at Bicton, because we cannot give training times to all our juniors and our both boys and girls under 12, under 14, under 16, under 18, and neither can you.
No, exactly, mate. No, congratulations on that, and I really hope that that all goes ahead. As you say, coming back to its ecosystem, and I heard one day, because I was coaching my son's basketball team, and I heard that Michael Jordan would do 1,000 jump shots a day, and I said to my boys, okay, if Michael Jordan does 1,000 shots a day, you guys should do at least 200 shots a day. So I had these 10, 11, 12-year-olds doing 200 shots a day, and we won 3 premierships off the back of it. Kids would be, one week they'd be shooting 3-pointers, the next week I'd say, he's not getting it. And the parents, sorry, Leigh, he hasn't done his 200 shots a day. But it was just a number. I didn't know if 200, but clearly I thought 200 is going to be better than 0. And that same principle, 1,000 jump shots a day, or as you say, 150, 200 shots a week. I mean, just yesterday, Elliot Roughton said to me he had to look after 30 or 40 14-year-old boys. Well, how are they going to get their, 20, 30,
They
40
can't.
shots a day in?
They
No.
can't unless they do extra. And I might say, you've asked for an example from me. I wasn't a great shot, but when in the summer at Bicton, when I had begun to be serious water polo player and had retired from state swimming, I used to have of a night, we have got pylons on the jetty down there.
Mm.
With a right, I'm a left-hander, and with a right-hander, I had 100 shots a night with a guy called Charlie Moore. So
Yeah.
we did at least
Yeah.
100 passes, and
Mm.
at a pylon, not at goals, just to try and get the
Hit that one spot.
Yes, to hit that one spot. We had a chalk mark on the pylon, and that was it. Of course, it wasn't that because we weren't always accurate, so we had to go and fetch the ball. But
Yeah.
that. Whereas in the Chozos bars in Hungary, which was the real key to the Hungarian development of water polo, it was a thermal pool with high concrete walls that they filled with thermal water every second or third day. There were 8 goals painted on the walls in chalk, but if they had a goalie, they had 2 hooks screwed into the concrete walls, and they had just a piece of wood hanging on it where a goalie could go and sit. But the huge advantage of that system was that they got rebounds. So when they hit the wall, they got or scored a goal, it rebounded off the concrete wall, and they didn't have to fox the ball. And you had
Yeah.
all these kids in the school holidays shooting around the side of the pool. And I'm only sorry I didn't take a photo of it because
Well, what a great, coming back to the forest shapes the tree. You create the ecosystem. It's kind of like build it and they will come. You create the ecosystem for excellence, like just something as simple as that. Coming back to, I've seen the water tank in Bowral that Donald Bradman used to hit the golf ball with a cricket stump on, back and forward, back. Well, that you go, okay, you start doing
same
that.
principle exactly.
Exactly.
He
Exactly.
improved his hand-eye ball coordination by that was what he did. But other batsmen, they've also done similar sorts of things. But the advantage that they have over our situation is we require a pool, and every pool wants payment to at least to enter us $7. To go to the nets, the cricket nets above our pool costs zero. To
Yep.
go to the football oval, as a kid, I played a lot of footy. I went to Aquinas at 7 and played football there all my life. And we went up the Melville Rec and kicked a football whenever we liked.
Yeah. I mean, what's
Even
his
out
name?
on the road.
There's the guy that talks about the 10,000 hour rule. You get the
Yes.
10,000, whether you're a guitarist or a piano player or a soccer player or a
Exactly.
footballer, the
And
10,000
they
hour
do
rule.
it in Europe. They do it in Serbia. They do it in Greece. They do it in Hungary. They do it in Barcelona in particular, because that's the centre of water polo with a car. And they've got all these kids training 4 hours a day, doing specialised shooting, doing everything.
Yeah, okay, let's come back to our kids here. Now, they can't change the pool. Luckily, a lot of their parents can afford the $7, thank goodness, which of course has an economic barrier to a lot of people. Let's come back to attack. If we're talking about specific drills and specific coaching, you give juniors and you'd tell our juniors to practice, what would be some key, and I'm not just talking extra man attack, I'm talking action play as well. What are some of the principles and even the mindset that you would be teaching people to be even better at attack?
Well, one thing is for sure, that they have to with the new rule where you swim in, and if you are tackled from, you have the ball, the referee can signal a penalty and give you the chance to score the goal, and if you don't, go again. So this going, the number of players who have missed penalties by taking them incorrectly, you must practice it on a whistle, and you must practice getting it by going in with a guy on your back and teaching the defender as well to put both hands up in the air. But in all the games I've seen this year in the National League, and I haven't missed one in this state, neither at UWA nor at Melville, the kids go in and have their hands in the water, so it gives the referee the opportunity to call a penalty, and it's not necessary and doesn't do anything to prevent the guy scoring the goal. So they've got to have a lot more close swim-ins where they pick the ball up on about a metre and a half to 2 metres and try and score the shot close in with the goalie close to them. And it's not that easy. A lot of the players miss it, and then neither is if they get the penalty that's awarded to them. The direct shot on the whistle from 5 metres is something that needs to be practiced time and time again. And I believe that at the end of every practice, everyone should have at least 5 to 6 shots on the whistle.
Penalties. Yeah. Brilliant. I talk about BDA, before, during, and after games. Let's talk about preparation, both, let's say, in the morning of and in the hour leading into the game. What are some of your recommendations, both physically and mentally, the player does in, say, it could even be the 24 hours in terms of eating, clearly alcohol drinking, the 24 hours and then leading into the warm-up pre-game? What are some of your recommendations and observations of the greats?
Well, I think you have to be not cavalier about any game. You've got to prepare yourself psychologically and mind repetition before the game is proven that it works. But, that depends.
Do you mean by mind repetition? Just explain that for people. When you say mind repetition.
I mean to imaginary situations, do mind rehearsal.
Of what happened in the game.
This position on that position, so that you go through it. It's as good as doing. There was a drill which is very interesting, and I'll explain it to you. In the Americans, when they were testing accuracy of throwing a dart at a dartboard, there was some study which I've got written down in one of my books, which I did for FINA. They divided the dart throwers into 3 categories. One group, they were all of equal quality, and they divided one group who went home and practiced throwing every night for 15 minutes at the bullseye. The other group did nothing, and the other group went and did mental rehearsal, throwing an imaginary dart at an imaginary dartboard. Now, that requires enormous mental concentration to do that for 10 minutes. And when they looked at the improvement, the group that did nothing for 3 months didn't improve their accuracy on the dartboard at all. The group that practiced every day had 100% improvement. I don't know to what extent the improvement was. That wasn't in the study. But those that hadn't thrown a dart, but had just done the imaginary throwing a dart at an imaginary dartboard, improved at almost 90% of the group that actually practiced every day, which showed to me the importance of the mental skills involved in accuracy in particular. Accuracy is a factor. Why does one player, when he picks up the ball and he wants to shoot it in the top corner, and another player also wants to shoot it in the top corner, but can't manage to do so? That is just repetition and work onto it. And not everyone has got equal ability at it. Accuracy is a very fleeting concept in water polo. Some people have it naturally, some don't.
Well, let's just talk about this for a second. Just the other day, because we come back to mental strategy and result, and obviously physical. Leigh, our Hungarian import, she's a left-hander, and she was in the extra man position on the top side, top of the key in extra man. She took one shot, and you can see she doubted herself. In my mind, she doubted herself, and she missed. And the second shot, she got it. And I said to her later on, because there's a principle in a book called The Inner Game of Golf, Tom. The Inner Game of Golf, the Inner Game of Tennis is performance equals potential minus interference. So if you have 100 units of potential, but 50 or 60 units of interference, you're in the. But if you can reduce the interference, you immediately improve performance. And I said to Lily, what was going through your mind in the first shot? She said, well, I knew we had double extra man, and I thought, should I pass it back down to the corner or should I take the shot? I said, interference. What was going on the second time? She said, well, it was the normal 6-on-5, and I said, I've got this. I said, there it is.
Yes, I understand what you're indicating, and that's a classic case. And I mean, talking about the golf that you just mentioned before, Tiger Woods is the greatest example on earth. That his phenomenal ability didn't come from nothing. He started at such an unbelievably young age, developing the skills with somebody coaching him. I think
his dad was at SAS, I remember, and then the father, if you remember, there was shots of him as a kid, the father standing about 10 or 15 metres away saying, hit it over my head. In other words, if he hit a bad shot, he was going to hit his dad in the head. So talk about repetitiveness, playing under pressure, or let alone Beethoven and some of these guys. Their father was a music teacher, had him playing at the age of like 2 or 3. So it comes.
That would be risky, because I as a kid got a stock whip, and I practiced cracking, because I'd seen at the circus cracking a cigarette out of somebody's mouth, and I'd been practicing on the garden fence, and then got my father and said, because he was a smoker, and I said, hey, I'm going to crack it out of your mouth. And I cracked his nose, grabbed the stock whip and threw it in the bin.
That is high risk behaviour, very optimistic. I think we could have to say you're a born creative thinker there, Tom. Let's talk about getting feedback from coaches and asking coaches questions and building a great relationship with the coach. The Kaizen mindset, the sigmoid curve says a team is somewhere on this curve on the way out, plateauing on the way down. A player is somewhere on this curve, and the name of the game is what do I have to do to move to the next level? And so from a coaching point of view, the player, a good player, a smart player, is asking the coach, what do I need to do to go to the next level? What's been your relationship with players in terms of ask the coach, getting feedback, receiving feedback, being proactive with the coach to go, coach, how do I get better, versus people arguing with the coach, thinking no more than the coach? Let's talk about healthy, positive, Kaizen, continuous improvement coaching relationships. Tell me some of the stories or your experience.
Obviously, you have to have a coach that you think you can learn from. For example, the person I spoke about, Alex Kurzicki, who coached us in 1964, used to say, use the widths of the pool. No one understood. I didn't either, but I later did. I understood. I found out years later when I was in Budapest, and I had a headache, because I had a violent headache. I'd flown with the flu and got right up into above the eyebrows, and I was in agony, and I lay down on the side and watched, and I finally understood what Alex had been talking about, but he couldn't explain it to us. So the first criterion is the coach must know more than the player, or the player is wasting his time to asking. That's the real issue. And I'm not sure. I've looked at a few of the coaches in the National League, and I'm not sure whether that would apply to everybody. I'm very impressed with Slobo, who's coaching UWA. He's a good coach. But I've seen a couple of the others, and they just appoint anybody as coach. And unfortunately, in the clubs, when juniors need feedback that you're talking about from a coach, they've got coaches who are parents and that, who can't give the feedback to make them improve, even if the kid wants to. That's one of the problems that I foresee within the Australian water polo hierarchy. It's not the case in Australian rules football, because everybody thinks they're experts. There would be 1 million footballers who could give young players great advice. 1 million in Australia. But in water polo, there aren't that many people who have the intimate knowledge of modern day water polo and an understanding of the historical development and where improvement can be. And so that's one of the, I think if you've got a good coach whom the players respect, they should all ask for feedback. But the other thing is we are amateurs, and when a game finishes here at 9:30 or whatever it is on a Saturday night, it's difficult. We don't even have film feedback. In Europe, they're professional players, so the next day after a game, they sit down with the coach, they replay the whole of the game point by point, and he gives feedback with the aid of the video replay. So
Brilliant.
these are one of the things. So we are still, by international standards, very, very amateurish. And certainly junior coaches. We have our junior program, as you know, up at HBF on Monday night, or whatever it's called now, and I don't think it's called HBF
Yeah.
anymore.
High Performance Centre. Yeah.
High Performance Centre. And no junior team in this state would get any video playback. We are not doing, even you, I know, you're one of the girls that came over with Balmain was from Como, and I know her father very well, Martina Romano, and he asked me to look at his daughter and tell him when it was being replayed. But it was done on just one person's camera, Damon Charles's camera, and on Claudio's here, and then put up. And it's not by any standards professional quality of video for kids to get enough out of it. In fact, he complained that he couldn't see his daughter in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, well, as it works out, based on that, talk about feedback on feedback. Burke, the Turk guy that's come over, he has used a different camera, a digital camera, which Ray used with the girls on Tuesday night. So it's because we said the Facebook camera is just almost a waste of time. So you're talking specifically, as you say, not only we've talked about pre-game preparation and we've talked about defence and attack in terms of during. Here, as you say, straight away, that rule, that system of film feedback day after, break the game down. I know Damien did it with our girls a couple of years ago, stopped it. Girls, why are you here? As I say to Ray, the camera doesn't lie. I remember at one stage someone asked John Buchanan, who people challenged as coach of the Australian cricket team, although they did play well, said, how can you teach Justin Langer or some of the opening batsmen how to be a better batsman? He said, I don't. I videotape them and they can see it on the video. The camera doesn't lie. And so, as you say, it's such a powerful.
That's right. It's almost a teacher. You just say, here's the evidence. Look at it yourself. This is what you did wrong. If they accept it, which they should, and they can see it. Video replay is the best teacher, far better than coach feedback.
Yes.
That's not good enough. But we are amateurs. Everyone in this country, I mean, there's a few clubs with professional coaches of some quality, but we are by and large, with our coaching of the juniors, total amateurs.
Yeah.
And no one would do any feedback. So the kids are learning nowhere near as well as their counterparts in Europe.
Well, I tell you, when I was coached, I had a master's degree in this and spent 40 years trying to get half good at it. And I used a principle from Galileo. He said, you cannot teach a person anything. You can only help them discover it inside themselves. So I would, even as 10 and 12-year-olds, go, boys, what did we just do well in that half? Well, the first time the kids went, what? I don't know. Within a very short period of time, they go, we went wide, we passed back. They can start to tune in on what they did well.
No, that's right.
And the same with defence.
That's the best we can do in Australia.
Yeah, get them to start being conscious themselves, because then they can start to coach each other on the field. They can start to take responsibility on the field. But the other thing there is, I talked to Cover about this, and he said, I don't want to do a debrief after the game, particularly if it's a loss, because people are so, I prefer to do it the next day. But I said, some feedback's better than none, of course. And even then, I suggest to coaches, don't tell. Ask them first. Elicit the feedback. The word education means educare, educe. If you can educe the feedback, you don't have to know. I mean, clearly, you can then build on their feedback rather than some coaches, the John Todds of the world, think they can just yell and abuse people for 20 minutes and think that somehow it sticks. But So this whole feedback mechanism, Tom, is critical. Comments on what I've just said.
Yes, well, I'm sure that's the case. And I can tell you in all my coaching career internationally, we didn't even have anyone that took cameras, films. There were no
No, most of those.
films. You had to go back. Olympic Games were televised worldwide, the games, but we had no access to them. All that has changed now. They've got every modern team has a photographer, specially to video, and someone with good skills of explaining it, and the coach then joins in.
Yep.
So, I mean, things have advanced. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying things were perfect in my time. In fact, they were certainly not the case. But in this country, firstly, the players next day after a Saturday game or Sunday game, they go to work or to school or to university, and the coach is probably out earning his living. The opportunity, and if the option is, do we have a training session of 1.5 hours or do we have a video session of 1.5 hours? A lot of them would choose the training session instead of both if we could have it.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it all boils down to it that we're not professional enough still in this country.
Well, Kaizen, mate, I think that's the principle of how do we keep getting better and better and better. And clearly the feedback mechanism, both after games and during games, is critical. I'm conscious of your time, Tom. I'm just going to go through some of my notes here, everything from as you say, that Hungary trip and you going with Spartacus and this fantastic history you've given. Talk about 3,000 people seeing games at that in Melbourne after 1956 is incredible. The ecosystem, the goals again around the wall. We talked about the 10,000 hour. We talked about film feedback the day after. The 100 passes, 100 shots a night. The pre-puberty skill acquisition, pressing without fouling, the blocking, playing in the lane, when to let that ball go. I said to one of the guys the other day, now that there's YouTube and you said there's so many different ways to shoot, there's no one particular way, the kids can actually look at YouTube and see how some of the greats are doing it. And I mentioned to Hannes the other day, when you organised and I commentated the 1983-84 pre-Olympic tournament we did at HBF Stadium, and some of the goals we saw being scored by overseas teams, I went, what the hell? Is that even humanly possible? But in the next 2 and 3 weeks in local water polo, the standard of goal shooting went through the roof because people started trying those new ways that they'd never seen before. Thanks to you bringing that tournament, which of course then later on we had the world championships here, mate. But is there anything you'd like to say or talk about before we wind up today?
No, but this year we've got a good opportunity because the World Championships are in Singapore. A lot of teams are coming here for preparation, men and women's, and in most cases, because of the proximity to Singapore, rather than fly the extra hours to the eastern states, we will get more than our fair share of international water polo. And I know that during the AYC, which is based in Perth this year, in April sometime, the qualification game between New Zealand and Australia men's best of 3 games will be held here in Perth between the 22nd and the 24th of April. I think the dates are, don't quote me, I might be wrong. I'm doing that off the top of my head. So, and then more immediately prior to the World Championships in Singapore, which begin on the 11th of July, Italy is coming, other teams are coming in men's and also in the women's. So we'll be exposed to a lot of international water polo. Even if it's in the winter, it's still better than nothing. Obviously, it's better in our summer because it becomes a better spectacle. When it's drizzling down rain, it isn't that special.
But it's a great opportunity for the juniors and the parents and crowds to come and learn and study what the greats are doing, and then go away and practice what they're doing.
Yeah, sure.
Tom, I just want to say thank you so much for this incredible sharing. People who play water polo, coach water polo, study water polo, in the water polo ecosystem are going to love this. I'm going to share it with you. You can share it with your club to spread this knowledge far and wide. As you say, this is not just a chat on radio about the life of Tom Hoad. This is really, clearly we've had parts of that, which has been marvellous, but going into some of the detail that coaches and players can take and use. So, Mr Water Polo, namaste.
Thank you very much, Leigh. Pleasure. Okay, thank you. Bye.
See you soon, mate. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank Claudio for the use of his computer.
Thank you, Claudio. Ciao.